Okay, we're going to resume the meeting, and we will move on with our final item of the afternoon, information report, item 3.5, state and federal legislative update. Chancellor?
Thank you, President Baca, members of the board. It's a pleasure to introduce Vice Chancellor for Government Relations, Vince Stewart, who's going to bring you up to date on a number of legislative activities. So, Vince, I'll turn that over to you.
Great. Thank you, Chancellor Harris and President Baca, Vice President Baum, members of the board. My pleasure to provide a state and federal legislative update this afternoon. I think I'd like to start with a federal update. And I know that the Chancellor and President Baca provided some summary of recent activities, particularly the National Legislative Summit, so I won't repeat that. I do, however, want to point out just the major issues that we were advocating for on the Hill. And we did have a series of Capitol visits. I think we numbered 16 meetings over 2 days. But we were focusing in on support for the Pell Grant, reauthorization of the Higher Education Act and the Workforce Investment Act, and then additional support for veterans attending community colleges. And I think with all the meetings certainly that I attended, we received a very positive and welcome reception from members and staff. The other thing I wanted to mention was a meeting that actually took place in late January that was postponed from December. And this was the White House Skills Summit. And this was a meeting that Chancellor Harris attended and really focused in on how do we increase the number of folks who are getting credentials and degrees across the country, and degrees and credentials that are tied to specific workforce needs. And this is an initiative that's not only spearheaded by the White House, but also is a priority for First Lady Michelle Obama. So those were a couple of other things that were taking place in Washington over the course of the last couple of months. And then I would also call your attention to a piece of federal legislation, H.R. 357. This is the GI Bill benefits legislation that would provide in-state tuition for veterans. That legislation passed off of the House floor on a vote of 390 to 0 and is now moving to the Senate, so it'll be referred to and heard in the Senate Veterans Committee as the next stop. In terms of the state legislative update, and hopefully you have them before you, the documents that were passed out this morning, the state and federal update as well as our matrix. I would just point out that we're currently in a busy time of the legislative season. The deadline for introducing new bills was February 21st, so we're currently going through several hundred new bills in terms of doing analyses and reviewing them for placement in our legislative bill matrix. Certainly the matrix that's before you is considerable. It includes many of those bills, but not all, and it will certainly increase between now and your next meeting. Rather than going through all of those, I thought that I would start by going through and highlighting the legislation that we're sponsoring this year, and there are 3 of those bills. The first is AB 1451. This legislation deals with concurrent enrollment. It's currently set in the Assembly Higher Education Committee on March 18th. We've been working with Assemblymember Holden, who's the author of this bill, and we have amendments that we've proposed to him to tighten the language a little bit and focus in on a couple of areas, specifically around the development of CTE pathways, and also looking at students who need some assistance in becoming college ready in the areas of math and English. We think those are 2 areas that can be of tremendous benefit in terms of leveraging and expanding dual enrollment. I would also say that the amendments really tighten the language insofar as specifying that concurrent enrollment would be expanded and provide some additional flexibility in the context of partnership agreements between school districts and community college districts. So we are certainly hopeful that this language will move forward. We'll be meeting with members of the Assembly Higher Education Committee over the next couple of weeks to talk with them, as well as talking with other stakeholders and building some support. The bill is currently co-sponsored by the LA Area Chamber of Commerce. I think we've got a good coalition of folks who are behind this effort. The other 2 bills in the legislative program that I want to mention, one is AB 2558, and this is by Assemblymember Doss Williams, the chair of the Assembly Higher Education Committee. He has agreed to author for us the legislation on professional development. This is the proposal that came out of the Student Success Task Force work, and specifically the Professional Development Committee. This would codify the changes that were proposed through those two groups, and our hope is that that would also be accompanied by a budget request to fund those activities. So that is moving forward. It has not yet been set for hearing in Policy Committee, but that should be happening over the course of the next few weeks and months. The third sponsored bill I want to mention is SB 965. This is by Senator Leno. This is the legislation that deals with stabilization funding. And in some unique circumstances, stabilization funding in the context of a district that undergoes severe declines in enrollment as a result of potentially losing accreditation, as well in the case where you have a special trustee that's been appointed. I will say that this bill has generated a lot of attention and discussion. I think we will be working, I know we'll be working with the author and others to refine the language, and that process is in place now. We have a little bit of time to do that, and that the legislation has not been set for its hearing in Policy Committee. A couple of other bills that I want to mention and call to your attention, and again, all of these are summarized in the state legislative update, but SB 850, and this was brought up earlier in the meeting. This is the legislation authored by Senator Marty Block that deals with the applied baccalaureate degree. As it's currently drafted, it would allow for a pilot program at each of our college campuses to implement the baccalaureate degree under specified conditions. I think this is another bill that's gotten a lot of attention and discussion. We've already met with Senator Block and are working with him to hopefully develop a compromise approach that would get to, I think, the outcome that he's seeking, but also do it in a way that would not generate the opposition of the UC and the CSU. And I'm optimistic. I don't know that I want to say confident, but certainly optimistic that we can get there. I think there are models that we can look at in the past in terms of the legislation that was enacted that provided the education doctorate for the CSU and other doctorate programs there as well. There are three other bills that I want to call to your attention, and these are bills that deal with accreditation. The first is AB 1942 by Assemblymember Bonta, and this would require the Board of Governors to develop accreditation standards, and it will also allow local districts to designate an accrediting agency for the colleges within its jurisdiction. And I think, these are three that are in play now or have been introduced. I suspect that they will evolve considerably over the course of the next weeks and months, as it's very early on in the legislative process, but we've certainly seen a lot of interest on the part of the legislature in terms of putting forward legislative proposals dealing with accreditation. The other bill that I'd mention is AB 2247. This is by Assemblymember Doss Williams, and this would require colleges and universities to post evaluation reports that are part of the accreditation process on their websites, and this is an effort at increasing transparency and openness of the process. The third bill that I would mention around accreditation is SB 1068, and this is a bill by Senator Jim Bell and Senator Jim Nielsen, and it's currently in a spot bill form. But we have been told by the author that his intent is to really do four things, and one would be to have prior legislative approval of new policies and procedures approved by accrediting agencies. It would subject the evaluation reports that are part of the accreditation process to the Public Records Act, and thirdly, it would prohibit accrediting agencies from charging costs unrelated to the accreditation process. And then lastly, it would allow community colleges to choose any community college or four-year accreditation agency that's approved by the Department of Education to handle their accreditation. So I think those are the three that have surfaced to this point. I suspect that we will see others. There are other bills that in one way or another touch upon the accreditation process or the oversight and governance of accreditation either through this body or other bodies. And I think as we move through the legislative process and those bills become fleshed out with additional details, then we'll have more to share with you.
If I could, Vince, interrupt you for a moment on this particular issue, I would remind the board that in addition to these three bills and the Leno bill, that the state auditor is currently under the process of auditing accreditation at our colleges. And in addition to that, the U.S. Department of Education has renewed its conversations, especially with the Western region, but with other regions as well. In my tenure, I've never seen this level of attention being paid to accreditation at every single level of government. And as Vince said, I suspect we're going to see a lot more of this. Having said that, I would remind the board that in its findings from the January meeting, 7 of our colleges that were on sanction previously have been removed from sanction. One of them was on sanction and was improved, and another was continued. So the news for our system is generally good recently. I believe only one new institution was put on sanction. So there's a great deal of debate, discussion, upheaval about accreditation, especially in the Western region, but frankly across the entire country. And I think what you see here in the California legislature with the state auditor and with the U.S. Department of Education is indicative of that.
Thank you.
So at this point, I would be open to any questions that you might have.
Before we get to maybe some questions, we do have a member of the public who'd like to address us.
Mr. Alvin Jaw.
My name is Alvin Jaw. I'm an independent supporter of City College of San Francisco. Because I ran out of time the last time I came in November, I've written my comments, so if I run out of time, it's all before you. I'd like to speak on 2 of those pieces of legislation, SB 965 by Leno, and the secondly, the Bonta bill, AB 1942. Excuse me. First of all, I do want to thank Mr. Harris and the staff for thinking up this idea of providing rescue funding for City College. Okay. And, you know, last time I came, I don't know if you remember, Mr. Agrella or Special Trustee Agrella was here, and he talked about the issue of instability at City College, and I riffed off that and said that the reason for that instability was the sanctions. Because once the sanctions of show cause, and especially the termination order came through, the students who were thinking of their future would start thinking of other options. Okay, so once again, thank you for thinking about this idea of providing rescue funding for the next 3 years. So that's the good part, but there's a bad part, okay? And the bad part are the 2 conditions on that bill. The very first condition is the institution has to be in jeopardy of losing accreditation. The second condition is that there be a special trustee in place. Okay, so those are the triggers in order to get money, which the college needs. Okay, so what kind of incentive is that providing? Is it providing incentive to entrench a special trustee in place for 3 years? Or, and also, is that incentive for maintaining the jeopardy of disaccreditation? Okay, if, you know, I may not finish, so you can read all that later, okay? So the education code requires that CCC, the chancellor, to the maximum extent possible, and I don't have the exact wording, allow local control of the community college districts. And to have that condition of the special trustee in order to trigger that funding is contrary to basic education code. Okay? And like I said, you have the paperwork. Please read it. It gives a little bit more detail. Before I run out of time, I'd like to say a little bit about AB 1942, the Bonta bill. The Education Code requires CCC to establish minimum conditions for schools to receive funding. Okay. Now, back in August, our city attorney, San Francisco city attorney, put in a petition for questioning the rule. What
Mr.
is
Jha,
it,
you have-
1510-016?
You ran out of time, but we'll give you 30
yeah,
more
but it's all on
seconds.
paper.
Right, okay.
Okay. Finally, one other thing I would like you to do, I have it on paper, the deposed trustee Anita Greer wrote a piece about City College, and I'll give it to Clarissa for all of you to read. It's a very good piece.
Thank you, Mr. Jha.
Thank you. Members, questions?
First off, thank you, Vince and Michael, for all your coordination of the trip to Washington, D.C. It was we had terrific meetings with lots of very engaged legislators and members of Congress who gave us quite a bit of time and attention to discuss the issues. For example, Susan Davis from San Diego was with us at the time that the government was passing its legislation to raise the debt ceiling and keep itself open, and they were about out of time. But she was more interested in talking with us about community colleges and made her way down to vote. I don't know what I said to Gloria Negretti McLeod, but the next day she declared that she's leaving Congress, and it was. But no, it was terrific. I just want to know what type of. Those meetings are encapsulated in the days we were there, and then so much happens subsequently. What will we do to follow up on those meetings? And then I have a question about one of the pieces of legislation.
Sure. So one of the things that Mike and I did, and I really do want to thank the GR team for pulling that together. They were just really tremendous in scheduling and doing the organization and the logistics. In terms of follow-up, all those meetings were staffed by either me or Mike, so we took copious notes. We will follow up with those staff and members who requested specific documentation, but we'll also follow up with correspondence just summarizing our conversation, letting them know that we're certainly available as a resource to them, and that likely we'll be coming back at other key points throughout the year to follow up on specific issues. There's certainly obviously a lot of interest in the issue of accreditation, so we'll be doing that, but also in terms of what's happening with the Higher Ed Reauthorization Act and Workforce Investment Act, and while that might not happen this year, we want to certainly keep our issues at the forefront. The other issue that we're definitely going to follow up on is the college rating system that's part of the President's accountability proposal. I think there's some key concerns there around that system and the degree to which it recognizes the unique mission of the community colleges and some of the challenges that our students face, and I think we certainly want to make sure that they're aware of our concerns, both at the level of the administration, but also with the Department of Education that's currently doing sort of a listening tour.
So everybody's going to get a letter back, and then I believe you and the Chancellor indicated there's a good chance you may be back in Washington again in the next spring. The other question I had from my local district is about the Leno bill.
Yes.
And one of the local trustees told me that the CBO conference, they're suggesting that if the Leno bill passes, all the local districts are going to be that it's going to cost local districts money because to make up for the budget shortfall that San Francisco is facing. How is that going to work? And are local districts actually going to be fined or billed for what it would take to take care of CCSF?
Right, and I may ask Dan to weigh in, as he's certainly much more of a budget expert than I am, but as I understand it, it works similar to the explanation he gave around the center for the Los Rios Center in West Sacramento, in that that comes out of the growth that districts would have otherwise received, so everyone takes a little bit less in order to provide that assistance to a district that's in those, under those circumstances or conditions. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I think the mechanism for the support is that it would essentially add to the regulatory stability that districts receive over time when their FTS decline from the prior year. So right now you have a 1-year hold harmless stability. This would extend the stability provisions for the City College of San Francisco. Essentially it's a matter of appropriate budgeting. That the amount we have in our budget that is intended to support the system-wide stability would need to be increased to take on this added obligation for City College of San Francisco. So it should not result in additional structural deficit for other colleges, though it's a fair point to say that if you assume that we're always going to get 11% of Prop 98, that these are dollars that could otherwise have been spent on other community college statewide purposes.
Really, the short of it is sustains community college, city colleges funding, right?
Correct.
I mean, it's essentially what this is asking to do.
I want to make sure the board knows this doesn't take money away from existing college budgets. What some could argue is that it earmarks money that districts could have gotten, but I'm not sure whether it's in this case or whether it's in the case of the small colleges that we had to provide some cover for a couple of years ago or other cases in the past. I think it's fair to say that it's a pretty draconian approach to believe that the failure of a college is in the best interest of other institutions who could therefore take advantage of their money.
Right, Right, and I'm hoping we communicate that. I don't know if you were, I only heard it secondhand. Was there a conversation at a CBO meeting to that effect, and that each district was presented with a possible fiscal impact? But that's the way it was presented to me, and I'm hoping that we are out there proactively addressing that.
Yeah, I have heard that issue from some of the CBOs in the system, and we have actually a meeting later this week for the ACBO is the statewide CBO group. We're meeting this week, so that we'll begin our we'll not begin. We've already had some of those discussions, but we'll be talking about it at that gathering, and hopefully the word will get out to the regions about how this bill will work.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Member Volansky?
I have a comment at least because of a lengthy email that I got earlier today from a CSU articulation officer who's probably been in the system for 40 years. This legislation on page 2 listed SB 1425, community colleges retroactive awarding of degrees. It may need some additional input from people as to what the real cost would be to do this. Because it not only talks about a centralized degree audit system, but colleges themselves just trying to maintain a degree audit system. And ours, I'll just say it openly, in my district, is out of date because we didn't have the funding to hire someone to maintain the degree audit system, because every time one of the 4 colleges in my district changes something in a program or changes something in a course or adds, and they may not be substantive, then we've got changes. So I think that the thing that, and I'll just say it, Catherine Barth at CSU Chico was trying to say, is this is probably more costly than people would realize, and that kind of analysis needs to be done with regard to whether this. And the other question I have is, would you have to notify students, we're going to award you a degree you did not? I don't know. I'm just curious. Anyway, I'll leave it.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you that it has been the past practice of a number of institutions to go into admissions and to identify degrees students have earned and yet not been awarded, and award those degrees. And the reason for that is very clear. life intervenes, as you heard earlier today, between the associate degree and the bachelor's degree, and too often students don't end up completing that bachelor's and didn't get the associate, or in some cases a certificate, and therefore, they don't have a record of educational accomplishment.
And do you leave a time period? Because also the questions come up. If you award the degree and the student were to come back to do something further, and suddenly they're not eligible for financial aid, federal financial aid, because you've awarded them a degree.
Well, I don't exactly know what the timing is, because that's really individual district determined. But generally speaking, it's not done immediately. It takes time to do that kind of work.
I would just simply note that
I think that's a very good question, and we will look into it.
It's going to be costly, and I don't see how you can do a centralized audit system when we don't have common course numbering across the state. That would even take more to do when you've got 72 districts that could be very different in how it's all formulated.
And I would just add that some of those very issues that you've raised, we've raised internally as well, and have already had some conversations with the senator's staff about the cost and some of the technical difficulties that might arise from trying to do something like this. So I think they're aware that there's some significant challenges, and they're opening to having us help them work through some of that.
Thank you.
We got any other questions? I just have a couple of comments or questions. First of all, what was that vote on the Miller bill?
390 to 0.
Can we apply that to the debt ceiling or anything?
I'll do my best.
I do have another question regarding AB 1557, adding 2 members to the Board of Governors. Just wondering if, and I don't have this, maybe just a question that we can ask the Assemblyman, but to consider the interest that he has in the armed forces, which is very commendable, having representation here, given the number that may be approaching the governor, and just simply indicating that maybe he filled those positions with members of the armed forces who are veterans.
Or reappoints existing members who are veterans.
Well,
Anyway, it's...
no, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't
No,
interrupt.
go ahead. I just... where is that at? Are you...
So I will say...
Maybe Mike might know as well.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, Mr. Holden is also the author of our sponsored legislation, AB 1451 on concurrent enrollment. I will be meeting with him later this week, and we'll certainly have a conversation about both bills. It's a bill that we have brought to the attention of the governor's legislative staff, so they're certainly tracking it and aware of it. So I think he has. I think this legislation is motivated by all the right reasons, and I don't know if he's fully aware and up to speed on, for instance, the veterans who have served on this board historically, yourself included, but also the vacancies that we currently have. So
Yeah, it just seems to me that it could be refashioned in a different way. That's my only,
absolutely.
that's my
We're going to be
point.
talking with him about that.
Very good. There not being anything else, thank you very much. You have some more to add? Or?
I would just like to do one thing, and I would like to introduce Edward Rodriguez, who is a student intern in our office. He is studying poli-sci at Sac City College. He is also a member of the California National Guard, so he's going to be working in government relations a couple days a week, helping us and also getting a feel for the legislative process. I just wanted to let you know that he's here.
So we can give you a round of applause.
Thank you for providing that intern opportunity, and thanks for your work on yours and Mike's on Washington, D.C. That trip was very, very well coordinated. Thank you. Okay, we will now recess. Before we do, we are going to move the public forum.
I don't have.
Don't have anything for
Clarissa,
public forum?
No cards, no cards for me.
And there being no new business, we will recess dinner at 5.
5 instead of 5:30.
5:30, okay.
Dinner's at 5 o'clock.
Okay.
Beth, did you hear that?